So the biggest challenges for the people who are buying is how do they find quality? How do they stay off the front page of the Guardian? How do they manage their budgets in a way that delivers the abatement they want and do it in a way that meets their long-term obligations? And if you're a supplier, it's just, how do I stay alive? How do I work through this messy period to get to the promised land?
Carbonsations, today's carbon industry leaders.
Are you passionate about climate action and staying on top of the latest trends in the world of carbon capture, removal, and markets? Then the Carbon Herald has you covered. Every week, we bring you the top news, breakthroughs, and insights from the world of carbon management, delivered straight to your inbox. No fluff, no jargon, just the essential info you need to stay informed. So whether you're a climate professional or just someone who cares, make sure you're subscribed. Visit carbonherald.com and sign up today for our weekly newsletter. Welcome to the Carbonsations podcast, where we speak to some of the leading figures in the emerging carbon industry. Joining us for today's episode is Dr. Julio Friedmann, Chief Scientist at carbon management company Carbon Direct. Julio, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really honored to be kicking off the new season of the podcast with you. You're a very unique guest in that your expertise extends to both carbon removal and point source carbon capture. So I'm really excited to get to speak to you about both of these climate solutions in the same episode. But before we do that, it's tradition on this show that we first get to know our guests a little bit better, like your background and what essentially brought you to carbon management.
Arithmetic. I got involved in climate some 30 years ago. And even then, it was clear that we were going to need something like carbon management to achieve our climate goals. We just needed rapid and profound abatement. And I started working in carbon capture back in 2002, but the arithmetic drove me there. Yes, we needed to have renewables. Yes, we needed biofuels. Yes, we needed EVs. Yes, we needed clean manufacturing, but we just needed to manage carbon dioxide directly. Since then, it has strengthened in my mind the fact that this is an all of the above approach. We need everyone engaged in climate, and in doing so, we need pathways that everyone can dive into. Carbon management is, among other things, a way for a lot of heavy industry, for oil and gas, for big finance, other groups to get involved in this stuff. Still remains the case. So I'm pleased to have helped make the field and have a job in it.
Wonderful. So please tell us what brought you to Carbon Direct specifically and what your role in the organization entails.
Sure. Carbon Direct was born from a conversation between myself and our founder, Jonathan Goldberg. Jonathan was on my board at Columbia University, and he came to me one day and said, "Hey, Julio, I see this huge wedge of stuff that sits underneath the zero line in your talks." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "If I'm doing my math right, that's the biggest market of human history." And I said, "Yes, that's true. I wouldn't have said that, but correct." And he said, "Terrific." And he went and launched Carbon Direct. The whole point is, if we need to do this at enormous scale, we should have serious businesses that do it. I started as just an advisor to the company, but at some point he said, "You should really do this full time." And I was pleased to accept the offer. When we started, the company was quite small. It was about 20 people, 25 people. Now I'm pleased to say Carbon Direct Incorporated, the advisory firm, is about 160 people. And that's the past 5 years of growth.
Wow. For those of our listeners who perhaps aren't familiar with Carbon Direct's work, can you share a little bit of what exactly the company does?
Sure. We help whoever our clients are, mostly businesses, but we help all of our clients affect and achieve real reductions, real removals, and make clean stuff. And we do it with science. That's the shortest way to describe it. In this regard, that can be, how do you reduce emissions at an existing power plant or an industrial facility? There's lots of ways to do it, but how do you actually do it? How do you make a clean fuel that can work in maritime or in aviation? How do you make clean concrete or steel? And then how do you pull CO2 out of the air and oceans in a way that is durable and high quality? And Carbon Direct started day one by saying, we're going to win on science. It has to be high quality and it has to be rigorous. Otherwise, we're all wasting everybody's time. The field itself is complicated. Trees are not rocks. Concrete is not power. These are really different things. And you need to have domain expertise. You need to be familiar with markets. You need to be familiar with biology and physics and chemistry in order to land in the right place. And so Carbon Direct staked its claim day one on having the best science team. And as chief scientist, I'm incredibly proud of what we've done.
As you should. Do you develop your own solutions that you offer to clients?
We do not make technology and field it. No, we do not. And that's fine. One of the things this means is that we do not have a dog in this hunt. We can tell whoever, this is the right solution for you. Maybe the right solution is reforestation. Maybe the right solution is a mixed portfolio of CO2 removal. Maybe the right solution is post-combustion capture on a natural gas power plant. Maybe it's using green hydrogen. Maybe it's bio-coke at your steel mill. But we're not vendors of any of these things. Because of who we are, though, we have touch points all over the world and in the market, so we're really aware of what's the latest innovation, what's the latest capability. So we have strong opinions about what geothermal systems work well and where they can be applied to reduce power emissions. We have pretty clear understanding of what's the latest AI-based tools to do nature-based solutions or to figure out the levelized cost of abatement in some geography at some site. The fact that we don't make things is actually a plus for our business because we're not hawking things. We're not selling a particular solution. We are finding the right solution, whether you're an airline or a bank or a tech company or a government or a philanthropy or a heavy manufacturer, we'll find the solution that works for you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for the explanation. That makes you the perfect person to ask the next question. I was wondering, Julio, if possible, to get a kind of a bird's eye view of the carbon removal industry at the moment. From your perspective, where do you see it at the moment, and where are you seeing the most exciting innovations happening today?
Sure. So the carbon removal industry as a whole, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times.
How so?
The best of times, I believe, is real. Like, we are in incredibly good times for the carbon removal industry. Let's start with a leveling. 5 years ago, this industry didn't exist. It wasn't a thing, right? Now it is. We've gone from 0 to 1. And we are seeing governments building CO2 removal into compliance regimes. We are seeing new companies starting and money flowing into investment. We are seeing companies like Microsoft or JP Morgan Chase or BlackRock like buying large carbon removal. We're seeing new organs coming up, new groups trying new things. Like it's actually pretty good. I will also say that at the specific moment, most of our customers are not backing down, they are doubling down. We are seeing increased ambition. We are seeing increased commitments. I'm not sure I would have said that 6 months ago, but I feel comfortable saying that now. At the same time, it's the worst of times. We have real headwinds that are macroeconomic, lending rates, interest rates, tariffs. All of these things are making the job harder for carbon management in every direction. Companies have less money to spend. So they are increasing ambition and they're spending money, but they're very careful and conscientious how they do it. The first half of this year was quite slow. There wasn't a lot of spending. We're seeing it pick up a bit, but if you're a small company trying to create a carbon removal solution, it's tough sledding. We are certainly seeing companies struggling to get the offtakes, to grow their teams, to push for policy which supports what they're trying to do. And that is true in many jurisdictions. And the same thing's true on a global basis. We're seeing the nation of Japan make very strong climate law with carbon removal anchored in the heart of it. That's fantastic. We're seeing the same thing in Brazil. We're seeing Singapore do the same thing. We're seeing novel projects appearing in the Middle East and in India. Like, the global perspective is kind of positive and interesting. But if you look at Europe, it's moving very slowly. It's hard to get the money. If you look at North America, the United States is retreating. This is not good for a lot of the previous investments, for a lot of the companies working. So it's a mixed bag for sure.
Yeah, and I was thinking maybe we could dive a little bit deeper into that, because as exciting and promising as you say that the still budding industry is, perhaps like most things in their early stages, CDR has its fair share of naysayers. And there's certainly some merit to the criticisms. Of course, nothing is ever perfect. But from your perspective, what are the biggest risks and opportunities that companies willing to support engineered carbon removal should be aware of?
Right, so let's focus on engineered removals. People are regularly asking me, why would anybody buy this? It's just a lot of money. And the answer is pretty straightforward, actually. Companies buy engineered removals because they know they need them. They need to grow the solutions themselves. They need to grow the industry. They are really worried about quality and durability. There's a bunch of poor decision-making and projects in the nature-based solution space, and our team works very hard to find the good stuff and stay away from the bad stuff. But there's risk out there. And so people say, well, the engineered pathways, I think, are going to be lower risk but higher cost. How do I still make sure that what I'm doing has quality? The biggest challenge here is, if there's one and only one challenge, I'd say that we still don't have the buyers we would like. We have a couple of buyers who are spending a lot of money and making good choices, but diligencing a project is difficult. You can't read a one-page document and know that something is good or bad. This is true for CDR broadly, but for the engineered pathways, it's particularly problematic. The second is just the financing. These are big projects. They might cost $500 million. If you need to get $800 million from a bank and you don't have an offtake, it's not going to go very far. Governments are, again, slowing the way that they talk about supporting these projects. Again, if you're in Denmark, you're doing pretty well, but if you're in Canada, it's harder. So the question of how do you actually pull together the money to get to yes, it cuts across many sectors and disciplines. You need the financiers, you need the policymakers, you need civil society, you need buyers and vendors all working together. And it just takes time and it's hard. So the biggest challenges for the people who are buying is, how do they find quality? How do they stay off the front page of The Guardian? How do they manage their budgets in a way that delivers the abatement they want and do it in a way that meets their long-term obligations? And if you're a supplier, it's just, how do I stay alive? How do I work through this messy period to get to the promised land?
Do you have answers to any of these questions?
We certainly do, but there aren't generic answers. One of the problems that conceptually people have with this field of carbon removal is they want to super simplify it. They're like, well, trees and rocks really are the same thing. So we can just have one standard or one artifact and then everyone will organize around that. That's just really not true. In the same way that people lease cars, buy cars, and rent cars, those are very different transportation services. The same thing is true for the environmental services of CDR. You're buying different products for different reasons, and you're trying to build a portfolio that serves all of your corporate needs, and it's not simple. The people who do the trading have died, a lot of them, on this conceit. They keep saying, oh, it's just like Brent crude. We can trade this stuff. The atmosphere doesn't care. No, that's not accurate. You have to actually grind down and figure out what you're doing and why. For a lot of the big companies, let's take a big airline, for example, they may only have 2 people at their sustainability desk. These people don't have the time to do everything. CDR is only one of the things they have to manage. They have to manage water and sustainable aviation fuel and contrails and regulations and all these other sorts of things. It's hard for them to figure out what's smart or not. And so it's very easy to just delay. What we need to do, both as specific enterprises and as specific companies involved in this, we have to grind down and say, what's the value proposition of what we're doing? How do we help people? If you're inside the company, how do I help my chief financial officer make the case to the board? If you're in a small company working up solutions, you're like, how do I really help my customers? Not how do I flog my product? And having that focus on being useful, I think, will work a lot of these problems out. I wish it was more cookie cutter and clean, but it's simply not.
Yeah, does kind of inevitably lead me to the matter of policy, I guess.
Oh, all of this is policy. You're doing this to internalize an externality. This is not something that will be solved solely by markets, and the voluntary carbon market is not anywhere big enough to deliver gigatons of abatement for decades. So It is all about policy.
Yeah, and in that line of thought, I wanted to also discuss some of the recent developments in the U.S., specifically around the 45Q tax credit, which underwent some changes, and the amount for DAC, direct air capture, where the captured CO2 is used for enhanced oil recovery, was bumped up to, I believe, $180 per ton.
Right. So specifically, the Carbon Utilization Act was embedded in the recent omnibus bill. And the Carbon Utilization Parity Act said we're going to take all the utilization pathways and make them equal to the storage pathways. In the most recent draft of that, and what became law this year, was to say EOR is one of those. Enhanced oil recovery is a utilization pathway, and it will also get cost parity.
Yes.
So let's be clear about what's actually happening. That's also true if you're doing CO2 to fuels, if you're doing CO2 to concrete with direct air capture CO2. They all got that same increase.
So what's your opinion on that, and what is the significance of this development, really?
Sure. So I think we need to get so much more of this stuff in the field. I am pleased to see that, first and foremost, the main provisions were unchanged. That itself was a big win. When there were lots of other tax credits that were being rescinded or substantially modified, to see basically everything stay the same in 45Q made me pretty happy. That's going to help investors. At this point, capturing CO2 from the air still costs something like $400 or $500 a ton if you're styling. If you're not styling, it's like $1,000 a ton. So adding from 130 to 180 bucks, adding 50 bucks a ton is not going to change much. The consequence of this will be a couple of projects might be a little easier to finance, but that's it. The world continues to use oil at an astonishing rate. We are not bending the curve on demand fast enough. If we can actually produce oil using CO2 captured from the air instead of geological CO2 or from a fossil power plant, I call that a win.
You mentioned also that this kind of puts CO2 utilization and CO2 storage kind of in the same basket. Do you believe that's fair? As far as costs go, maybe.
So first of all, if you were a CO2 utilization company, you couldn't get CO2 because there was a massive price disparity. So you would go to a power plant or a hydrogen facility or a direct air capture people and say, we want to buy your CO2. And they're like, we get paid more to store it. There was actually a problem getting supply to the CO2 utilization people. That's the basis on which the bill was crafted in the first place. If the only dimension that you care about is climate, one can quibble over whether we should be putting more money into storage versus utilization. I'm happy to have that intellectual discussion, but we are hilariously far from that world where the only thing that people care about is climate. We need to create an industry out of whole cloth. People care about jobs. People care about energy. People are grappling with these large issues. The idea that we should only be providing incentives for storage. I think, as someone who spent my career working on climate abatement, I would love to see the incentives be larger for storage than for utilization. But I understand the logic, and the pendulum will swing back. In the meantime, can we please get some companies up? Can we please get some projects built? Can we please have some trade? Can we please have some foreign direct investment? We need so much to get this enterprise rolling. The question of whether there's a slight increase in utilization money, it is like majoring in the minor. That's what Arnold Schwarzenegger calls these things. Can we please focus on the most important things? How do we create the enterprise we need? The same thing is true for things like MRV. MRV is important. We need to do a good job doing it. It is one of 20 things you need to do to make sure that a project is good. Do we have the workforce we need? No, we do not. Do we have financiers who understand this market? No, we do not. Do we have standards and regulations that are accepted around the world? No, we do not. And we will know none of those things until we build projects. Projects are the money ball for climate here. We have to build not just CO2 removal, but we need more green hydrogen projects. We need green steel projects. We need sustainable aviation fuel projects. We need more geothermal and small modular reactor and fusion projects. We need more carbon capture projects and point sources. We need more solar and offshore wind. We need all these things. And if you focus exclusively on the climate dimension of these things, we're not going to get to the promised land.
On that note, what's your observation? Have things really dramatically slowed down as far as projects go, specifically in the US with the change of administration and funding cuts happened in the beginning of the year?
So there's some really awful stuff, but let me start with the not awful stuff. For starters, we are seeing a lot of projects continuing, in part because 45Q has largely remained stable and unchanged. That is continuing to bring foreign direct investment into the United States for carbon management projects of all kinds. That's great news. It is also true that despite the rolling back of the solar and wind tax credits, we are seeing solar now 30 gigawatts deployed in the United States because it's cheap and the supply chains work and people need power. So the markets have these logics about them. If there's enough stability, you can still do good things. We're seeing more geothermal. We're seeing money going into nuclear. We are seeing more, continued investment in venture companies for new solutions of various kinds. I will say that the damage caused by the administration is significant. Most importantly, pulling back the money from OSED, the Office of Clean Energy Development. There were a bunch of projects, including things like the direct air capture hubs, industrial capture demonstrations, that were good projects. And the money just got ripped out of it. And that's going to chill investment. That's going to end some companies that were good companies that shouldn't have died. That's going to make markets skittish. I'm sad to see those projects that were rigorously vetted and approved and directed by Congress ended unilaterally by the administration, and to no end. It is abandoning America's advantages, and I find that frustrating.
So, for a bit of a crystal ball gazing question, where do you see this headed in the future? Do you see the industry, both carbon removal and carbon capture, do you see it still being able to grow and develop despite this? Is there a way for carbon management to still prosper even without political support?
Let me start by saying I care less about 2050 and more about 2030. I'm really focused on the next couple of years. This is the decade that matters, and we need to get stuff built and operating. In that context, our customers, our partners, our clients see all of these things as multi-decadal investments. If they're going to buy a 20-year offtake, that's not driven by political cycles. I would add that technical findings do not go away. Climate change is real and it's man-made, and we know that. And the whole world is organizing around that sensibility. Many of our partners and customers are not really US companies, they're really multinational companies. And they have to operate in Japan and Europe and Brazil. They have to operate globally, and as a consequence, find opportunities globally. So I do think we're going to continue to see more investment in these projects, and we're going to see more built, and we're going to stay the course. It will probably be slower than it might otherwise have been because of US policy decisions by this administration. And I see other countries grabbing the mantle of leadership, which we have owned for a long time. It's frustrating, but it is so. In the 2030 timeframe, though, I see us doing more and building more as a world and as an industry. And I think you're going to have to be creative about how this is done. It's not all going to be layups. You can't automatically expect you're going to get non-dilutive capital from the government. Given that, what else can you do? During the original .com bust, a lot of companies died and there was a lot of struggle, but the giants of the tech industry today were born out of that industry. I think we're going to see something similar here. The struggles that people are facing right now are going to case harden and strengthen some set of players who are going to become the carbon management juggernauts of the next decade.
That brings me to another very important component of carbon management, that is CO2 transport. because even if the stars align perfectly and we're capturing all of our carbon and reducing legacy emissions, we still have to put it all somewhere, and that requires moving it from A to B. So my question is, where is all of that right now in the US, and how do you see it developing in the future as well?
Thank you. One of my favorite questions. Let me take a step back and say something distinct about carbon management is it is moving molecules. It is not moving electrons, and it's not moving bits. You have to have physical infrastructure to move physical things. And sometimes people in policy circles or in the environmental community miss this point. We need the infrastructure to do the job. And it has to be built and supported. It can come in many forms. Transporting CO2 can be done with pipelines, can be done with barges, can be done with ships, can be done with tank trailers. But these have different environmental impacts and costs, permitting, regulations, timelines, volumes. But we have to think carefully about how to get these things done. The United States, still the best in the world. We got 8,000 kilometers of CO2 pipelines in this country. And they move large volumes of CO2 from point sources to storage sites. We have the best regulatory regime in the world for permitting CO2 storage in Class 6 wells under the EPA's underground injection control program. Like, we're best at this. But if we're going to get the volumes we need, we're going to need more dedicated infrastructure. We need more storage sites. We will need more transportation infrastructure. In the near term, we're going to start reversing pipelines where we were using natural gas in the past, and now we're moving CO2. Tallgrass just did a project in Nebraska that looks just like that. And they were able to make a deal that worked for communities, for environmental activists, for the companies themselves. I would like to see more of those kinds of things. But we're also going to need some new infrastructure. And permitting that stuff, getting to yes, is difficult. I sincerely hope that people will take the job of putting that into place seriously. And people will shelve their disdain for infrastructure projects in service of climate and in service of these new emerging infrastructure and industries.
From what I gather, one of the main roadblocks tends to be exactly regulatory approval.
Yes.
For pipelines specifically. How would you say we overcome that?
Oh, there's no easy answer for that. One of the things we learned with Navigator and with Summit, these two companies that are trying to build CO2 pipelines in the United States, is that some states approve this at the state level, but some approve it at the county level. And if one county can hold up a massive pipeline, that's very hard to fix that. It is possible to get that fixed at the national level, to give FERC new authorities or the Department of Transportation new authorities to permit these things and to fast track them and so forth. I think that's not going to be great. I think that's going to create friction and difficulty. One of the things I wish more groups would do is use existing rights of way. We have railroad tracks. We have freeways. We can actually put pipelines that don't go through farmers' fields and don't go past people's homes. Like, I understand that there's a way to optimize this stuff for cost, but perhaps we can optimize it for other things as well. Minimizing environmental impacts, speed to market. That will end up costing a bit more, but only a bit more. We'll still have to find the money, but if we need to get this infrastructure built, we have to be, again, creative about how we do it, using existing rights of way, fast tracking some rights of way for speedy approval. These are things that we can do. Otherwise, we're just going to see more projects in Wyoming, Louisiana, and Texas. That's not exactly going to deliver everything we need.
Yeah, unfortunately. Julio, I have one final question for you before we wrap up. So unfortunately, that's all the time we've had for today. What does Carbon Direct have planned for the next few weeks and months, perhaps, that you're comfortable sharing with us right now? Sure.
Well, one of the things I'm excited about is New York Climate Week. We're going to have a fairly large presence there. It is, the Coachella for climate. Like, there's going to be a lot of good discussions and excitement around that. Carbon Direct is excited about the work we're doing in geographies around the world. We're hoping to kick off and announce shortly a project in Latin America that we're excited about, a project in East Asia that we're excited about. And again, these are geographies where countries and companies are stepping forward. one of the things I'm very proud of is we just finished our first internship program. This was a program named after one of our former employees who passed recently, Wilfried Moss. And we just ran a pilot with 2 sensational interns, posted about that on LinkedIn, and we are hoping to expand that in the coming year and have more people come in and work on these things. Carbon Direct wakes up every morning thinking, how do we do abatement? How do we do reductions, removals, and make clean products? And part of the things that we're excited about is, in addition to the carbon removal offerings, which we are very proud of, we are getting more into clean electricity. We're getting more into environmental attribute certificates for clean goods. The challenges the voluntary carbon market has seen in the past 2 years, these new industries are just beginning to see. And so we can take the experience that we've gained working in carbon removal markets and bring that into these new enterprises in a way that will hopefully move with greater speed and less friction.
Hopefully. And yes, that certainly sounds like a fantastic lineup of events. Definitely looking forward to New York Climate Week as well. Julio, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It was a real pleasure to speak with you. Thank you again.
My great pleasure. All the best.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Carbonsations podcast and would like to hear more conversations like this, please be sure to subscribe. We really appreciate the support.